This episode of Hodinkee Radio is brought to you by Lucid Motors, pioneers in luxury electric vehicles. Experience the fusion of high-end technology and sustainability with Lucid. Dive into the world of EVs and design with us, recorded live from the Lucid Studios here in Geneva. Ladies and gentlemen, it's day 2 of the Hodinkee Radio podcast, straight out of Geneva. I've got another cast of characters with me today. Some you might recognize, some you might not from yesterday. First of all, we've got James Stacy, who's been holding in a lot of hot takes from yesterday. James, how you doing?
Hi, Tony. I'm really good. It's really nice to see you, and it's a pleasure to be on the show.
Thanks for joining the show.
I watched yesterday from behind the camera. It was a really good episode.
You contributed from behind the camera, which I think says a lot about your prowess as an editor nowadays. Next to you, we've got Mark Kauslerich. Mark, how you doing?
Feeling great. Happy to be here.
And finally, you may recognize him from yesterday's show. That's right. We saw the comments, so we brought him back again. Danny Milton, how are we doing today?
The Corduroy Kid.
The Corduroy Kid. Not getting any sleep. Really glad to be here.
No, why would you? Danny, quickly, what's the best thing you saw today?
Ooh, Tony. Well, the best thing I saw today, to take a page out of Ben Clymer's book, is something I can't talk about. But something I can talk about. I will say the best thing I saw today was a watch I talked about yesterday, the Zenith Defy Revival Diver, the orange G thing. You know, it's this 37 millimeters. I don't know, Mark, if you knew it was a 37 millimeter diver.
Appreciate the reminder.
Yeah, for sure. It is a 1-to-1 effective recreation of a 1969 dive watch. Was in the meeting with James today, where he also really enjoyed the Defy Extreme Diver. I don't know if that's your choice or not, but
It was not.
Okay,
Great watch, though.
Great watch for
Yeah.
sure. But that'd be my pick, Tone.
Okay, let's start here. Before we get into it a little bit more, I want to talk about this because you went to Zenith. So we're going to talk about a number of brands today. We're going to talk about Cartier, Tag Heuer, Grand Seiko, IWC, Lange. We're going to sprinkle in a little bit of complicated Vacheron at the end for your viewing or listening pleasure, courtesy of Mark, of course. The new most complicated watch in the world, I think. So hang on for that one until the end for sure. So that's the reason we're focusing on these brands today. These are the things we've seen in person. This is why we focused on Rolex, Tudor, and Patek yesterday. That's what we saw yesterday. So if we still haven't covered your favorite brand, hang on tight because we still got 2 more days of appointments, 2 more days of shows. Things like Chopard. Who else are we going to be seeing the rest of the week?
Moser.
I'm popping off site tomorrow for a couple of appointments with FP Journe.
FP Journe. A lot of us are going to be making our way out of the Palexpo at some point tomorrow to see things off-site, more boutique, independent watchmakers, which should be exciting as well. So if we haven't hit your favorite brand or you didn't just hear it listed, stay tuned, baby, because it's coming.
Stay tuned, baby.
Keep that dial locked. James, what's the best thing you saw today?
Be the Ultra from Bulgari.
Yes.
Super, super, super high-end watchmaking can be difficult sometimes to understand what makes it so special. This is not a watch that needs much of an explanation. It's like somebody handed you a magic trick.
Yep.
Is the best way I can describe it. It doesn't weigh anything. It's impossibly thin. I don't understand how it doesn't fall apart. I'm holding it like it's made out of ice on a hot day, thin blades of ice, and the gentleman who designed it and presented it to us was kind of tossing it around the table and showing us how good the bracelet, like how articulating the bracelet is. It has this beautiful, really clever clasp. I mean, this is a watch I highly recommend that if you're watching this, feel free to pause, open another tab. Please don't leave. That would be mean. Pause, open another tab, and go check this out because the watch is impossibly thin, really, I think quite beautiful, like in an industrial sense,
It's
but
gorgeous.
like a beautiful design.
Gorgeous.
And like it's so thin that like Danny holding it at profile for me to take a photo, my camera had trouble deciding where the actual edge of the watch is. Like a credit card isn't even quite accurate. It's probably pretty close to the thickness of a credit card. It looks thinner than that.
It looks like
because
that
there's
for
also a whole watch inside that case.
Do you know the number, how thin it is?
It's 1.7 millimeters thin.
So is that, to be clear, this is the thinnest watch in the world?
World's thinnest watch and world's thinnest chronometer certified watch in the world. So it
Gotcha.
claims both records.
Yeah, and because the case is an integral part of the actual movements construction, that COSC element, the chronometer element, is done fully with a fully cased watch,
Yeah,
which isn't that common.
That was cool to know because the movements.
You can't take the movement out of the case.
The case is the main plate, and so they were able to get the certification fully cased. That watch is crazy.
I also just think it's really cool that we have the record back in a watch that is representative of the other watches that they're doing, like from form and design and everything like that. Like the Richard Mille, I never saw it in person when it was briefly the thinnest watch in the world, but like you had to have a key to wind it. It didn't look like any other Richard Mille. It was weird. Like this is Bulgari.
It's
from
just
the moment that you
it's
see
an
it.
octo.
Yeah,
it's a
an octo.
finissimo, just as you'd expect. Fits right in the lineup, and like it's again the presentation we got. He showed us like this entire watch is thinner than the bezel on an already thin octo finissimo.
Yeah,
It's cool stuff. It's worth checking out,
You know
even
what
if
they
you're
say,
like
James, the best
not-
meetings are at 9 a.m.
I mean, I can't. You want this on record?
Okay, Mark, best thing you saw today.
Tony
Moving
keeping
on.
me off the anger train, keeping me off the anger train early.
Honestly, man, it was a full day. I think we ended on a high note. We saw the Grand Seiko Kodo.
Oh, man.
At the end, which is I wasn't in the industry when the first Kodo came out, really, so I never got to see it. I didn't know when it would come through New York on tour or whatever. But this is a constant force tourbillon, super intricately skeletonized. I will say, like, it doesn't necessarily remind me of any other Grand Seiko that I've ever seen, and in this case, that's actually kind of a cool little thing for them to pull out. But man, I spent a lot of time photographing that in a meeting, and every time I'd hand it off to somebody, I'd look at my pictures and be like, oh, can you hand it back, because I need to take another photo of this thing that I just discovered was a part of this watch, and it was super cool.
I missed the Kodo when it first came out a couple years ago, and I only just got a chance to see the original one weeks ago in New York at a Grand Seiko meeting, and then they launched this new version, which is the Daybreak. So there'll be 20 of these. There's 20 of the previous, which had more of a darker finish for the movement. You know, the mix of platinum and titanium in the case is fascinating. In my mind, it doesn't. It very much feels like a Grand Seiko. It just doesn't feel like their other watches. It's not like it builds upon an active line, kind of like the Octo Finissimo would. But I think that it's almost like the brand kind of saw what Grubel Forzi was up to and was like, oh, we can do that too. And the watch is stunning. I mean, it has a stunning price tag, but it's not without merit. It's quite a thing.
It's what,
365 grand, something like that.
345, I think. But yeah, I mean, you know, give or take
20 between friends.
Yeah.
Tony, what was the best thing you saw today?
Thanks for asking, Danny. It's going to be a natural transition into the first brand we're going to dig a little bit deeper into today, Cartier. Seamless transitions, the professional I am, Danny.
Interestingly,
Like
that
one?
was an
I love
afternoon meeting, and it went pretty well.
It did. It went well. I agree.
Cartier is always one of the best meetings of the year because there's always some stuff that they don't send you in press releases. That's kind of this weird one-off stuff, or just these kind of quiet releases that they'll only end up making for a year or two that are sort of commercial watches that people are going to buy, and you'll see them out there, but they just kind of sneak them onto the tray, and then you say, hey, wait, what was that? But for me, the headliner from Cartier is the Tortue. It's the year of the Tortue. I talked about it yesterday. I said I wasn't so sure about it, but guys, after seeing it, I really like it for a number of reasons. Number one, they shaped the movement to make it kind of the tonneau-shaped, Tortue-shaped case, which is really impressive to rework the original sort of movement like that to make it shaped to the case. It's something that not a lot of brands are doing. And then the thing they did with the design that I really like is it to me calls to mind more of these 20s or 30s vintage Tortues. The original mono pushers from way back in the day, long before Danny was born, and it's more like those than the CP ones from the 90s, which the aesthetic is a little more not my style, let's say. So I like that they called back to those a little bit more.
You know, those CP Tortue mono pushers like have gotten kind of hot lately, and I don't know why. They've slowly grown on me, but the more weird ones that don't try to be the original ones, like, are confidently their own things, like the one with the big 12, really cool. But this one, you look at it and it's like, oh, this is what Cartier would have been doing in the 20s. And I think I talked to someone recently, there's from those 20s era mono pushers that they were drawing off of, I think there's 7 known in yellow gold, 1 in platinum. And to think that 100 years later, that inspired Cartier to completely redesign a movement, put it into a case, do something cool is pretty awesome.
And it's also cool if you go into the booth, they've got some of the heritage pieces there, so you can see the old 20s or teens Tortue, however old it is, and you can see the inspiration right there. Obviously, it's a tenth of the size or something compared to the new one, but it's quite cool to see, and it was one of my favorite things of the day. But that's not all we saw from Cartier. There are hours and minutes Tortues as well. Nice watches, nice additions to the Privé lineup.
I like those quite a bit.
You like them?
Really
James?
good on wrist.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
quite nice on wrist.
Nice short lug to lug, mostly dial. Just wears nicely, legible. Nice straps even.
I like that they bring. They won't call them Breguet hands. They'll call them Apple style hands. I think is
Palm
Cartier
hands?
lexicon.
Palm hands.
Yeah, exactly. But I like that they put the hands in those. They could have been blued, I think, in the hours and minutes ones. I think would have been a nice design choice. They can kind of blend in with the dial a little bit, but just nice classic Cartier dress watches. The price is a bit punchy. It's around $30,000 for the yellow gold and for the platinum. So it's a little bit punchy, but this is what you expect from a limited edition Privé watch. We saw the same thing with the Normal last year. So
I also think that like Cartier has a tendency, and you guys talked about it on the podcast yesterday, to do the thing that a lot of brands do, which is not give you exactly what you want, but to put their own twist on things. So you say like blued hands. Same last year with the Normal. Like, would have been great if the platinum one didn't have a completely illegible silver dial. But this is, I think, a good place for them to start with something that's going to be very limited and understand that like it's a platform for the future, and they will either take special orders or whatever that will get closer to the original and maybe closer to kind of things that we would have put together if we were in charge of the brand.
yeah, it's a good point. The monopusher, to me, the perfect monopusher would have been the platinum one with the yellow gold dial that you see, which has dark Roman numerals, more contrast, more legible, just a better looking dial to me. But they didn't do that. They gave us a little bit of both in each watch. But Danny, we saw more than just turtles at Cartier. Anything else you want to mention that you liked or didn't like from Cartier?
I think there's a watch I really did like from Cartier this year. Not that there's not watches I like from Cartier every year, but it always seems to be a Santos Dumont of some kind. And this year it was the Rewind.
Tell me about this watch, Danny.
I would love to. First of all, it harkens back to a watch that was designed long before I was born. And
Did you like that one?
I
Snuck that in there, huh?
You really did, Tone. The Santos Dumont Rewind, it has a red carnelian dial, matching cabochon, platinum case. But if you look closely at the dial, you'll notice that the Roman numerals, the applied markers, are moving counterclockwise. 12.
The applied numerals are moving?
Not moving. If your eyes move counterclockwise, they will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And the movement's inverted, so it tells the time in reverse.
Okay.
So technically speaking, it's telling time backwards, even though it's still technically telling time forwards. But to me, that is
I need another beer before
that is
The layout of the time is reversed.
was that confusing?
You made it more complicated.
I'm not confused. I mean, your explanation was deeply confusing. The
Let's
watch
start-
isn't.
Let's start over, but leave this in the pod. Yeah, Tony, my favorite watch was the Santos Dumont Rewind. It has a red carnelian dial and a platinum case. And what's interesting about this watch is the movement is effectively inverted and the numerals on the dial are reversed. So in essence, it's telling the time quote unquote backwards, but it just means that if it's 10:10, the 11 is where the 1 would be, the 1's where the 11 would be, and so on and so forth. So you're just telling the time in a fun, sort of quirky way. For me, it's Cartier having a little bit of fun with a watch in a way that I don't think it normally does. It has this year the same Santos Dumont lacquer releases that it's had every year in some form or another, and where that would be the brand having fun. I think actually changing the mechanics of a watch to make it harder to tell the time is truly a much more unexpected way for Cartier to behave. Almost, it's not quite as crazy as Rolex doing a puzzle dial.
I was literally about to make this analogy, and I was going to ask if I was crazy for making the analogy.
It's close because that watch still told time, but the complications on that watch didn't do anything.
Right. What day is it? Smiley face.
Exactly. Smiley face day and smiley face love day and smiley face date, or whatever it is. But this one, it's cool. I mean, it's the kind of watch that you get to, I think, could get someone very interested in the idea of mechanical watchmaking because it's a riff on something that's like effectively straightforward, but you're tweaking it and just having a bit more fun.
Yeah, and you could get quite existential about, what is time and all of these types of things. We'll save that for the late night show, but it does provoke one to ask such questions, which I think James was about to say something
I was just going to say, as someone who's owned and worn a couple 24-hour watches, Glycine, Aeronautic, that kind of thing, it takes a day or two for me to adjust to 24-hour time being displayed. So if you like think about it, literally, the hour hand doesn't make 2 revolutions for 24 hours; it makes 1. So noon is at 6, etc. Going full backwards, I think if I was like fully adrenalized, like this would be fine. At a glance, I'm not gonna. My whole life will fall apart.
But I think
I'm gonna be late for everything or early. I don't know.
But in some ways, like Cartier is the perfect place to do something like this.
Oh, totally.
I actually thought the other day, like, what would happen if Rolex did a backwards time display? Everybody would lose their minds, probably absolutely hate it, think like everybody at Rolex was pulling a joke, and like here it's, oh yeah, this is Cartier just having fun with something. And I think like it just shows that different brands do different things.
But I think it's similar to what they do with the Musta Cartier line. Like in some respects, like having no markers whatsoever on a dial makes it extremely difficult to tell the time. Time is almost secondary with Cartier in some respects. It's always been design forward. It's always been statement make forward. And
and it leans in a little bit into the existence of like watches as jewelry, watches as an accessory.
Exactly.
The fact that we're surrounded by clocks and time otherwise. Like we're like, don't get me wrong, we all sit here and we love watches, mechanical watches. It's all great. I like to tell time with a watch on my wrist, but a huge portion of the population doesn't. And you definitely occasionally even meet people. I met someone yesterday who like had not set the time or date on their watch. They put on a watch they really liked to go to a watch show where they had their phone in their hand all day. And they went, around that. So I kind of understand a certain philosophy towards appreciating the mechanics and the fact that it's a Cartier and the look of the Santos and everything, but then having an entirely different sort of outlook on how necessary the time might be when you're wearing the watch.
Was that me?
It was not.
Oh, okay.
Can I go from esoteric to adorable for a second with Cartier real quick?
Please.
The watch that had the biggest impact for me was actually the smallest watch in the room.
Oh yeah,
I absolutely love the
cool
fact
thing.
that the Tank Louis Mini, was it? I don't know. We came up with so many silly names for that watch in the meeting that I actually don't know what I saw, but it was one of these ultra small Tank Louis. I saw one at a Sotheby's jewelry auction last fall and tried to pick it up, and I didn't end up with it, but they're so tiny. And it also is something that I thought like, oh, brands would never bring that back, even if you have movements that do that, which they do in jewelry watches. But to just be like, what was the measurements on that? Do you remember?
No.
Okay. Well, I mean,
anecdotally, it was like the size of a bead on a beaded bracelet. You know,
Looking around trying to find something, it's not big.
Check the show notes.
yeah. Well,
Check the show notes. That'll be a plug to the show notes that we work so diligently on. But they also had a mini Tank American.
This one I like quite a bit. It's cool.
You're more of an American guy, huh?
I don't know. I think in some ways maybe I haven't found my natural place.
They don't
Cartier.
make a Canadian, so
Yeah, exactly. There's no Canadian. I mean, free idea. But yeah, I like the American. I love the way that it fits. They had a larger model in solid gold that was like genuinely lovely on wrist, and like it's just not a watch that I cross paths with that often. But it's a treat to see them. And I thought the smaller one, especially on some of the smaller wrists in the room, was like small with a statement, but not small to the point of being less watch for your wrist, that sort of thing. It was cool.
It was great to see Ben put on that tiny Tank Louis, and just like I think Malika has a photo of that. It was great, but also
pretty easily place the entire watch within the confines of a postage stamp.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Oh, yeah.
and
Not very
also
big.
somebody had the idea of like a great dual time setup, like
Just wear 2.
just wear 2 of them, and it'd
Two
be
different time
smaller than any
Yeah.
GMT that you own.
Yeah. I think, James, to
Put them
your
on
point about
one
the-
strap, like
Well, to your point about the strap, there may not be a Canadian, but you just throw it on one of those Patek denim straps, and you might
Canadian. Those are Canadian straps. That's what they're called. Not by Patek.
You might be cooking with
you
something.
got the makings of a Canadian for sure.
Hey, what do you think of the dual time? The Santos dual time? Did that do anything for you?
This is a watch I was pretty excited to see. Obviously, I'm a complete knucklehead when it comes to GMTs, travel, complications, that sort of thing. It's kind of a long-standing fascination for me. It's also, in my mind, when you think Cartier and dual time or multiple times on watches, they're multiple movement, like stacked watches, which I would love to own something like that one day. What an exciting, cool, neat way to go about 2 time zones is 2 watches, put 2 watches in one case. I love it. I absolutely adore the idea. This, on the other hand, is a much more conventional It's a brand new movement for the brand. I don't remember the reference number of the movement, but it's fitted to a full-size steel Santos de Cartier, and I really like it. It's a little shinier than I expected in person. It's also, being a full-size Santos, quite large. It's 40 millimeters in both directions. It's big. It's got a lot of bracelet. I think with the bracelet fitted, I don't think it would be too big because of the shape of the Santos case and that kind of thing. But the Santos has a lot of different sizes, and the large one, because of the prominence of the middle sizes, the large one feels quite large. And the way they've basically done the dual time is it's all based in the crown, so no buttons or any of that kind of thing. And you just have a second hour display at 6 o'clock that has an itty bitty AM PM indicator that just goes between black and white at the 6 o'clocks. And it's I liked it. I put it on. I mean, I'd love to try it sized and wear it around for a little while. It's very like all gray, being steel with a gray dial and luminous hands. I think it's cool. It's a little over $9,000. Which puts it into a kind of a competitive space for multiple time zone or dual time zone watches. But it's neat to see the brand move in that direction, and I always love just being able to add a new multiple time zone movement into because now I think of all the watches that could go in at Cartier. Yeah. That would be so cool.
Yeah, it's a watch that I would, if you did a more in-depth hands-on review of it, I would certainly read it, because you're the GMT guy, not only at Hodinkee, but just worldwide. James GMT.
Mr. Worldwide. They've been calling me that for years.
They have been.
Nobody else has that nickname.
They have been. I think Cartier, they kind of played the hits this year. I'm kind of just going to wrap up Cartier, guys. I think we covered it all, right?
I think you're right.
I think they kind of...
Feel free.
Feel free to wrap.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. They kind of played the hits in a way. We kind of know what's going to come from Cartier a lot of times. They're going to do a Privé. It's a riff on one of their classic shapes. They're going to do it in a few different metals, and it's going to be limited. They added the complication this year with the monopusher, so that's a little something different, which is fun. The Banoir had a lot of success last year, the Bango Banoir, so it's cool to see them expand the sort of mini side of things in a really fun and well-executed way. And then some of the stuff like the Santos Dual Time and all of these things, they're digging into the archives in a way, but also doing it in a new way that I think is really well executed. So that'll wrap up discussion of Cartier. Before we head on to the Tag Heuer discussion, I want to talk about our sponsor for this week's episode. As you guys know, we're sitting in the Lucid Motors studio here in Geneva because this episode of Hodinkee Radio is brought to you by Lucid Motors. Step into the future with Lucid Air, where extraordinary performance meets exquisite craftsmanship. At Lucid Motors, we're redefining the luxury electric vehicle, combining exceptional range with sophisticated excellence, all while prioritizing sustainability. Every Lucid Air reflects our passion for excellence, from its serene cabin made with eco-friendly materials to its aerodynamic, elegant exterior. Feel the difference with Lucid Motors. Learn more at lucidmotors.com. Or, like us, come by the Geneva studio, guys, where we've got a Lucid Air sitting right in front of us. Danny, let's talk about Tag Heuer next. So Danny and I went to Tag Heuer while you guys were at Grand Seiko. So wait in line. You'll get your turn. We're going to talk about Grand Seiko a little bit. But Danny and I are going to riff on Tag Heuer for just a second. Danny, the hero product, as far as I'm concerned, is the new Monaco Retropont split seconds. Just tell me a little bit about that watch.
Well, look, I wrote the intro post for that one, Tony. These stories, they write themselves. And basically, this is the halo product for Tag Heuer this year. I think we talked about this yesterday a little bit. This takes the Monaco from an engineering perspective, does something very similar to what Tag Heuer did with the Carrera glass box last year, which is take a classic watch and redesign it basically from the ground up and bring it sort of into the modern context. Where the glass box didn't really shift from a price perspective, the Monaco did in a big way.
Let's just get it out of the way. How much does this thing cost?
It's 135,000 Swiss francs, so do the math.
And they're
in
making
dollars.
40 of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's very, very, very limited production of these, but I've seen this watch several times at this point. So we saw it today. I saw it a few days ago, and I saw it a couple months ago back during LVMH Watch Week. And in talking to the brand, we know that this was a passion project in a lot of ways, a way for the brand to take the Monaco and really sort of like show what it can do and lead from what they're referring to as like an innovation perspective instead of like cost conscious. So the entire project, I mean, that's silly, but it also is true. Like cost was not what they were trying to control. And I think that if you look at a watch like this and you see what was going to be coming at Only Watch, which has now been delayed quite to some point. Mark, when is Only Watch now?
May 10th, I believe. They've announced it. And I think 25% of the brands have pulled out, but
Tag Heuer
Heuer is still there.
So.
And the Vacheron is there, and that's sort of the first one that we saw, which kind of played spoiler to this watch. And it's a really, to me, it's a powerful statement of a watch. I think that Tag Heuer knows it's going to be able to find the clients to buy these for sure, just like it did with the Plasma. And it's an impressive piece of engineering from a brand that most would consider to be quite industrial.
Yeah, so they partnered with Vacheron, kind of the famed movement manufacturer,
Right.
to build this thing from the ground up. A brand that also, or a manufacturer that also helps make movements for RMs and those types of watches. So it's, in a way, it's an RM in a Monaco case, and it's a wild thing to see. I think for me, it's the avant-garde type of stuff that I like from Tag. The Plasma that they did last year and that they've continued to do doesn't do as much for me. It's just not like rooted in the heritage of Tag
Right.
Heuer and the brand in the way that a Rattrapant or a Split Seconds Monaco is, the racing heritage, the chronographs, all these types of things. The story writes itself, right? So this does something for me in a way that I didn't expect, I suppose. That said, $130,000 Monaco, 130 Swiss franc Monaco, of which there are 40. I'll probably never see them again, which is fine. It's really cool, sort of experimental thing to see at least once in my life.
I think you have to look at it on two levels, though. Like on one hand, I think it represents the next generation iteration of Monaco, because it's not just the Split Seconds, complication. It's also a complete refresh and redesign of the watch, full stop. And I don't know this for a fact. I can just assume that this will be the standard from which future Monacos, work from. And who knows whether, if they decide that this is just a breeding ground for highly complicated chronographs, fine. But it would be nice to see the Monaco in this form sort of slimmed down and refreshed and feel at once modern and playing on the heritage the same way the glass box is. And that's what gets me excited about it. In every way that I love the fact that it's a Rattrapant, it also feels like just a really nice evolution of the watch.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, let's be honest. The Monaco, the shape, is kind of a ridiculous proposition by
Sure.
its nature, right? It's this big square thing that doesn't fit a lot of people's wrists super well. It's a statement piece. I mean, that's how people were wearing it in the 70s. That's how people continue to wear this thing. It's a big watch. There's no way around it. So I think it's a perfect home for Tag to do these types of crazy feats of watchmaking.
What do you think of the size of this one, though? 41 millimeter.
No, the case that you
Yeah.
mentioned, it's sort of redesigned, slimmed down, and all these things. It's better than the previous generation.
Yeah.
So in the same way that they redesigned the Carrera last year with the new generation of the glass box, I'm excited to see them making their way through the historical catalog and modernizing it in a way that feels really cool and true to like what the Monaco is. And
Let's
what it
do a
can
segue.
be.
That was a good segue. Let's do it.
To the Carrera.
There we go.
Yes, thank you. I didn't even mean to set myself up, but the Carrera, which is much nearer and dear to my heart in the Tag Heuer catalog than the Monaco, if we're being honest. They introduced a new Carrera. Basically, it's a Panda dial, sort of a 2-register glass box Carrera. It's a cool watch. It plays off of the 7753 SN vintage Carrera 2 registers from the 60s or the 70s. It's a cool watch. It's a cool addition to the catalog. The sort of bigger note about it, though, is that they've added a bracelet to the Carrera chronograph for the first time. So this is something that thinking back, I did a week on the wrist with the black dial Carrera that they introduced last year. One of the notes that I wish I had made, not a criticism, but just a desire, is that I wish they would have added a bracelet to the watch, and now they have it. I mean, a lot of these beautiful vintage Carreras have these great old GF bracelets, and I'm glad that they have a bracelet that makes it a true competitor to chronographs you get from other brands like Tudor, Breitling, whoever you can go on down the list. And now if you're a bracelet guy or a bracelet gal, you've got that option from Tag as well. We saw it only on this new 753 reverse Panda kind of play, but I'm excited to see what it looks like on the black dial, the blue dial that we've already seen. Anything you want to say about the new bracelet?
No, I mean, I've been told that it's now sort of on display at Tag Heuer boutiques and probably authorized retailers on the blue and the black as well. So they're prominently sort of pushing this new bracelet option on these watches. And I agree with you. I think it's a really good option, especially considering the fact that last year you could basically only get it two ways. If you're going to get the blue watch, you're getting a blue leather strap. If you're getting the reverse panda, you're getting sort of that racing style.
Yep.
Strap, and of course, like you can strap to your heart's content with other options. But from an OEM perspective, it's cool to be able to have a bracelet out there, and I like it, especially on this new one because you have that high contrast. The internal tachymeter scale is done in black this time, which I think in all the two other iterations it was color matched to the dial. So it's the first time you have sort of that secondary level of contrast.
Yeah, it helps too. I think the whole scooped look of the dial is kind of it takes some getting used to, and I think adding the contrast on the outer ring like that helps kind of offset it can be a jarring thing to look at the first time. So I think that helps a little bit.
Speaking of jarring things to look at, I think the last one I want to touch on
Please.
is
just anything is a transition now. Speaking of jarring.
Speaking of jarring things, the rose gold skipper.
Okay.
When I saw this in press images, I was jarred. I think that the skipper is so iconic in its steel state that to see just the case material changed while preserving the same exact color scheme on the dial feels, especially in rose gold, a little weird to me.
A little wrong.
It's
just,
Yeah.
I love what they've been doing, and I like the idea of the skipper, but like I was like, what?
Right, exactly.
What did you do?
And then when I saw it in person, like it's better. Obviously, like most watches, they tend to be better in person. But I still feel like if I had been, if my opinion meant anything, I think white gold would have been cool just as a stunt piece.
Don't worry, it doesn't.
Just because I know that it doesn't, but just to maintain like the spirit of the watch, I think white gold would have been.
Yeah. Why not platinum, Danny? Why not
Or
go all the
platinum?
way?
Hey, Tone, let's get crazy.
Yeah, I agree. On the other hand, I saw the yellow gold Carrera for the first time, the sort of play on let's just call them the Ferrari watches, basically. I think Mark wrote it up on the site a while ago when it was released. Love that watch. As much as I love that watch, I am equally unsure, like you, of the rose gold Skipperera. And I think we can leave it at that for now.
I think that covers Tag Heuer, Tone.
Okay, so while Danny and I were at Tag Heuer, you all were across the Palexpo at Grand Seiko, an appointment that I sadly was not able to go to. So I'm going to need your help a little bit walking me through some of the watches. We talked about the Kodo at the top, an addition to the lineup, but a hell of a watch, I must say. Another watch that is more just Grand Seiko being Grand Seiko is the SLGW 002 and 003, kind of these new hand-wound watches from the brand. Mark, can you explain these a little bit more to me?
So I've been thinking for a while that I don't really have something that fits the sort of traditional dress watch mold from a modern lineup, and when I saw these watches in person, I actually got to see them just a little bit before Watches and Wonders and photograph them. I immediately thought the SLGW 003, the brilliant hard titanium version, was potentially going to be like my next new watch. Really great high beat movements, manually wound. It's something that Grand Seiko hasn't done in a very long time, the manually wound high beat movement. It's the 94SA, I believe, or something like that. 9A, I don't know. But I
Check the show notes.
Show notes will have it. But they basically redesigned
9SA4.
9SA4. I had the mix somewhere in there.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
I looked on your story.
Well, I appreciate it. And somebody had to have read that.
You once knew it.
Yeah, at one point. But now they've taken sort of a base movement that they had before in an automatic, and they didn't just take the automatic components out. They apparently redesigned 40% of the movement to turn it in this really tactile, really like audibly satisfying manually wound movement. Like it's one of those watches you just wind and it's like super satisfying. It wears really well. The titanium case, super high polish, doesn't look like the dark titanium that you often get. There is the gold version of the watch that's limited to 80 pieces, I believe, and it's around $45,000, the 002. And I kind of just put that out of my mind. That's not exactly where I'd be shopping at the moment. But actually, Ben was in the meeting, and he seemed to keep going back to that one over and over. And
Yeah, seemed to like it. I mean, he likes a hand-wound watch to begin with. This is a little bit more refined, a little thinner. Movement's just barely over 4.1 millimeters. Whole watch is under a centimeter in terms of thickness. I was impressed by these. I was impressed by a handful of them. The other one that kind of stands out to me is they've got a special dial treatment of the spring drive chronograph. So this is the I'm going to read it on my phone. The SBGC 275
chronograph GMT.
Yeah, with a GMT.
Is that the red dial?
It's red sometimes.
What is it the other times?
Well, it has a special dial treatment that, at least according to GS, certainly hasn't been used on any of their watches, but isn't known to have been used on another watch. And it's sort of a directional treatment to the metal of the dial, where depending on the angle of the light, it changes color. And it's like I've heard, you sometimes, we brought up in the meeting like midnight purple, Nissan GTRs that kind of change color depending on the light. But this, like, the entire dial basically shimmers from one tone of red to orange to brown. It's
Magentas.
It's pretty cool. There's a lot of purple in there as well. I haven't seen it like done before, and while I find these chronograph GMTs to be quite large watches for my wrist, to take that concept, that coloring, that treatment of this kind of fire that you get in the dial and put it into, say, like a 37.5 millimeter SPGW, I think would be pretty cool, kind of compelling take on especially that line and how many dials we've seen lately into it.
Guys, let's get complicated for just a second. So, Mark, I'm going to tee you up to talk about Lange. Let me get the full name of the watch, or at least try, and you can tell me wrong, and then talk and tell us whatever you want about seeing this watch, photographing it, being able to handle it, because I haven't been able to see it yet. So Lange, it's their 30th anniversary this year. In celebration of it here, they have released the honey gold datograph perpetual calendar tourbillon, and if that's not enough, it's also a lumen. So a lot of the big keywords for big-time Lange collectors in this watch. What'd you think?
Well, first of all, if you are in Geneva and you're going to stop by the Lange booth, come around the top of the hour, get there a couple minutes before, and they've got a display of the giant mock-up of the watch that's actually a functioning chronograph this time, and the entire booth dims and the watch lights up like a lumen, and the chronograph hand goes around, and then it slowly lights back up as the minute elapses. Cool display for a really cool watch. I mean, this is sort of the pinnacle of 25 years of the datograph for Lange, which, they started with the Lange 1, but for me, the datograph is kind of where they finally like hit their stride and said, like, look at this incredible thing that we can do. Perpetual calendar, tourbillon, datograph, big data at the top. It's all the things that you would want. It is incredibly expensive. Every time I've asked people what they thought it was, we had to keep bumping up by hundreds of thousands of dollars in increments.
Like $500,000?
It is $620,000 with 50% down required. And they're already getting a decent number of orders for this watch. There's only 50 being made. 50 is actually honestly a lot for a watch of that complexity and of that price. But if it's out of your reach, there's also a limited edition white gold up-down datograph, the more traditional, more simple but still gorgeous datograph with a blue dial. That I wasn't sure how I would feel in pictures. It just didn't do much for me. If you've ever seen a datograph or any Lange in person with a black dial, the AR coating on the dial actually kind of can trend that black dial blue at certain angles. So it's like, oh, it's a white metal case with a dial that looks like it could be black and it's just photographed poorly or something. But in person, it actually is really punchy. That one, found out today, is $131,000, which is quite a lot. Limited to 125 pieces, I believe. But it's a big moment for Lange. It's a big year, like you said, 30th anniversary and 25th for the datograph. And originally I thought, oh, maybe they'll do a brand new movement for the datograph. Like, that seems like the appropriate way to do the 25th anniversary. But then if you remember that the datograph perpetual tourbillon is the pinnacle of what that collection could be, this makes perfect sense. Technically, they did do a new movement for that pinnacle watch. They did a bunch of things like remove the power reserve indicator on the front of the dial, and that's not as easy as just removing a dial part. You have to, I think there's 45 less parts or something like that. So really, really impressive accomplishment, really impressive watch, really big watch, really thick watch, really a watch with a lot of presence, but something that'll definitely stick with me. And I spent 45 minutes on Sunday trying to get good loom shots of this. I mean, it's not easy, so I was very lucky to have some time and get to spend some extra time with this watch.
James, you haven't seen the Lange stuff, have you?
I haven't. No, I wrote up the up-down LE.
Okay, so no additional thoughts then.
Nope.
for
No,
now.
I think Mark covered it. He saw it. I think
that's
even just for Mark's photos alone, both of those stories are worth it, and I'm sure we'll have more in the future. But I think both like just ridiculously awesome watches. Not what I would call commercial product, right? Are also, to be fair, not really what Lange does. This is kind of what has become a huge hallmark for the brand. Are these like very special, very expensive, very difficult to buy sort of pieces, and it seems to be working for them. My guess is they're not having a lot of trouble finding, applicants.
Yeah, and I think 30th anniversary, like we said, I don't think this will be the last time we hear from Lange in a big way throughout the rest of the year. I have no inside information on that, though, Danny. I'm a mere podcast host. It's not the only complicated watches we saw, Danny. We went to IWC together, and it was a big year for the Portugueser, so they often kind of focus on one model, updating it or expanding the lineup. So we saw some Portugueser, they updated just the time only, some aesthetic updates, some case updates, as well as updating and adding some dials to the perpetual calendar. And then I guess the eternal calendar is also in the Portugueser family. Is that right?
That's right, Tony. I think this year what we saw was a lot of upgrades, updates, and then one, again, sort of hero piece. And across the board, I think what we saw was a uniformity in a trio of colors. I believe it was Obsidian, Dune, and Dawn. I think the blue was the Dawn, and the Obsidian was the black, and the Dune was the sort of like
I gotta say, man, these color,
tannish
these dial
gray.
color names.
It could have been Daybreak for the blue, if I'm not mistaken.
You know what? I honestly should know because I photographed. I think I edited maybe 90 photos from a little preview that I got of. It's a lot of SKUs. It's a lot of updates for one brand to do to one line.
It is, but it's a lot of updates within a trio of
yeah
dial colors and a host of metals. So obviously, another call out to the show notes that will all be very clear to you there. But Mark, I want to throw to you briefly about the Eternal Calendar because that's just sort of a crazy, crazy watch. And just Hodinkee alum Logan Baker is walking by the Lucid studio right now.
Can't believe he gets a shout out.
And just want to give that guy a shout out. Can't believe he gets a shout out.
Now we'll know if he listens or not.
Speaking of people that are really good at understanding incredibly complicated watches, Logan Baker. The Eternal Calendar. Okay, so IWC now joins a small group of individuals or brands who have accomplished one of the most complicated things to do in a watch, which is build a secular perpetual calendar, a perpetual calendar that can adjust to the fact that every 100 years we skip a leap year, except if it's a year divisible evenly by 400, in which we have the leap year. It's a calendar that is smart enough to do all that and apparently is accurate until the year, what was it? I think it's the year 3999. Yep, that sounds right. 3999.
Fact checked. That's correct.
James with the live fact.
Thank you. Appreciate it. What would I do without you? But
You guys would be
You would have been in this case. You would have been right.
okay, I would have been right with it.
It would have been fine. What do you know?
But
James, you can leave now.
I got a dinner to get to, fellas. I'll catch you later. It's been great.
I do want to say, to IWC's credit here, the reason it's only accurate to that point is apparently the governing bodies that decide how calendars should work don't know what to do with the year 4000. They haven't gotten that far ahead, so very well could be accurate much further.
Y4K is coming?
Yeah, Y4K. I'm not going to be here for it, so it's not my problem.
The elevators won't work.
And but the other crazy thing about this watch is that, well, two parts. One, the moon phase is accurate to 45 million years, which is just, again, completely unnecessary. And I think there's a lot of really cool things going on that brands are doing.
Fact check. That was a fact.
Fact check.
Also, a remarkable number, IWC. I mean, like, come on. That's
Double
pretty
yes
cool.
from James.
But I like the next nearest accurate moon phase was 2 million years, and that was just done as a flex, and now they're at 45 million, and it's a whole different
Boy,
ballgame.
imagine how red their face is, whoever did the 2 million year one.
Who is it? Can we say?
Andreas Struller, I believe.
Oh, okay, sure.
So, and then the last thing I'll say that it was really cool is same case size as the normal perpetual calendar, which
That's remarkable.
It is remarkable.
it's price on request, so I don't know how much price you have to spend to get a watch into a case size like that. But it is a really, really cool watch. Really great feat for them. I think there's only 5 other companies that have done this before. So
No, it's amazing.
Yeah, engineering like this is very much in the, not to use a cliche, but the DNA of IWC, going back to the Kurt Klaus days and all these types of things. So it's cool to see them continuing to do that type of stuff. We've got to talk briefly about one more complicated watch, guys. And
Very,
it is
very complicated. Tom.
slightly complicated.
the world's most complicated watch now. Is this correct?
Yeah, the Vacheron Constantin just announced yesterday that they have created, again, beating their own record, the world's most complicated watch. It's called the Berkeley Grand Comp. 63 complications, beating their last record, which was 57 complications. For some reason, the number that sticks in my head is 2,877 parts. Took 1 year to build the watch after they had completely designed it, which that took 10 years before that. That also means that they were designing this watch before they had even finished the last most complicated watch, which is just like, if I was the watchmaker, I would be kind of disappointed knowing that like my record was already going to be broken eventually. Like that watch didn't even get to really live in the moment. But
I can barely write 2 watch stories at the same time. Like,
You can write 2 watch stories at the same time?
probably not.
Oh, okay.
Like keep one going and then go to another one and come back to it.
the watchmaker told me that the last 3 months of that construction, he didn't sleep super well, because if you make one mistake, you wreck a main plate, you set back 4 or 5 months worth of work. But kudos to them for pulling it off. The main achievement here, the last watch, the 57-260, had a Judaic or a Hebraic perpetual calendar, runs off of moon cycles. This ups the ante with a Chinese traditional perpetual calendar, even more complicated. You've got zodiac signs, yin and yang. On the back side of the watch, you also have a Chinese agricultural perpetual calendar, which is similar to what we hear about for the seasons in Japan, where they break it down into smaller seasons. So there's like a date that is the day that insects wake up and come out of the ground, and that's on the back. I mean, it's absolutely wild. Bug day. The watch is little over 90 millimeters in diameter. It is 50 millimeters thick. It weighs 2.1 pounds. It is absolutely wild. You can barely comprehend what's going on with that watch. And I also think like it's a watch that you really can't comprehend unless you live with it, which only one guy, William Berkeley, who lives on the East Coast in the United States, he owns now. He was commissioned the 57-260. He commissioned this watch. He has the 2 most complicated watches in the world. And I think he's really the only person that will ever get to fully experience what this watch can do.
Good for him.
Congratulations, Mr. Berkeley.
Yeah.
Guys, we're leaving it there today for real now. I want to give one quick shout out and thank you to our video and audio editor. That's right. I'm looking at you, Joe Wyatt. Not only are you killing it on the 1s and 2s, for everyone at home,
He's got the 3s and 4s going as well.
The 3s and the 4s. Joe walked over to the swatch store today. He bought himself a Blancpain 50 Fathoms swatch. Joe, which one did you get for the people at home? He got the new black
the
one.
The Ocean of Storms, everybody.
I'm so glad to hear you made the right choice, Joe. Congratulations
well
to
done,
you.
buddy.
And thank you for your excellent work.
Way to go, Joe.
Thank you all for listening. And like I said, we've got another full slate of appointments tomorrow. We'll talk about everything we saw tomorrow at the Polexpo and Offsite Watches and Wonders. So please stay tuned. And thank you again to our sponsor, Lucid Motors, for sponsoring this week's episode of Hodinkee Radio.
Thanks, Tone.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.